Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Coaching Chapters. This week I'm joined by Naeema Rahman, a Harvard-trained clinical professional, executive wellness coach, and the founder of the Wellness Lab based in Dubai, offering neuroscience-backed wellness and emotional intelligence coaching for executives and senior leaders. She has spent a decade of her professional experience as a qualified UK pharmacist. She's an EQ life coach, an NLP practitioner, and certified hypnotherapist. Naeema blends her knowledge of science and psychology to help individuals and organizations cultivate emotional agility, resilience, and optimal wellness. Today, she's joining me to talk to us about everything gut health related and why it is so essential for us to change our mindset and be aware that actually the gut is our second brain. Hi Naeema, welcome to the Coaching Chapters podcast. I'm so excited to be having this conversation with you today. Before we jump into all the wonderful knowledge you'll be sharing with us, could you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about your background and the work that you do?
Yeah, of course. Hi, Binish. It's such a pleasure, firstly. I just want to say thank you so much for having me here today to share all of this amazing information and knowledge with your listeners. I'm Coach Naeema, founder of the Wellness Lab, and I work at the intersection of mind-body wellness, emotional resilience, and my work focuses on helping people to build emotional resilience within themselves, to understand the way that their bodies work and how to really truly integrate that mind-body connection and show up as the best version of themselves in their lives. So it's really holistic and everything is so beautifully interconnected. And that really empowers me to empower other men and women to take control of their health and their life. And I know we're going to be talking about gut health today, something I'm so interested in, and I think it's so topical at the moment. So do you mind demystifying what do we mean by gut health and why is it actually even important? Yeah, sure. I mean, this is a real hot topic right now, isn't it? It's all over social media. Everybody's talking about it. But essentially, what gut health means is very, very simply how healthy our gut microbiome is. So our microbiome, when it comes to our oral and gut health, actually starts all the way from our mouth. Up here and goes all the way down into our stomach, down to our large intestine, small intestine, all the way through our bowels. So there's actually good and bad bacteria that exists within our gut. Now, when we have an imbalance of the bacteria, when we have the gut bad bacteria, let's say, which is colonizing and it's higher than the good bacteria, this is called dysbiosis. So this is when the gut becomes unhealthy. And what we can see show up in terms of bad gut health might be inflammation, IBS, gut type of issues. There's so many different conditions that come as a result of that, leaky gut being one of them as an example. So essentially, when we're talking about gut health, we're looking at what your nutrition is looking like and how that's impacting your gut and its ability to function, its ability to absorb nutrients efficiently, to contract efficiently, to really get the nourishment from the food that our body requires and to keep things moving smoothly. Because it's not only just about the absorption, it's also about detoxing the body. So when the gut health is in a good place, we're able to detox efficiently and we're able to absorb efficiently. And that allows our bodily functions and processes to be working beautifully and synergistically as it should.
I love that. I love the detail in that and just really understanding clearly why it's important and what it really means. So I know a lot of women in their 30s and their 40s, they're constantly saying they're tired. There's an increase in feeling bloated, that mental fog of not remembering things. Can you explain how our gut health might be actually linked to some of those symptoms?
Yeah, well, absolutely. I think this is a really, really common challenge that many women face. And when we're hitting our 30s, 40s, there's actually a lot of hormonal shifts that are starting to happen, which directly influence our gut health. And one of those is well, we have those shifts where our cyclical changes are happening, but as we approach our 40s, some of us are entering that perimenopause phase, and this alters the levels of hormones within the body, which will perhaps go into detail a little bit later, but estrogen and progesterone are the two main ones that we're looking at. Now, what happens when these hormonal shifts are occurring, and then we throw in stress and we throw in modern eating habits, this now begins to impact that gut microbiome that we talked about earlier on. So now that gut microbiome is looking a lot more imbalanced, which we call dysbiosis. And that can lead to the things that we talked about, like inflammation, bloating, unexplained kind of cramping, and even menstrual changes, etc. So it's directly linked to gut microbiome. Yeah. And when we're looking at the hormonal changes, the stresses that we have in that phase of life, that can directly impact gut health in a negative way.
Yeah, amazing. And there's a lot of noise out there around the gut being the second brain. Do you mind explaining what does that actually mean in everyday terms? Why is that something we should be aware of and understand what that phrase even means?
But it's actually very literal. And so, with the gut has its own nervous system, and it's called the enteric nervous system. Now, that actually has, surprisingly, many people will find this quite shocking to hear. It has over 100 million neurons, and there's a production of serotonin and dopamine within the gut. 90% of serotonin is produced within the gut. So when people say things like, "Oh, I have a gut feeling," that's actually biology. It's not poetry. So it's very, very real in that it has its own nervous system, and it actually helps us to some degree to regulate our emotions. It has a direct impact on that. So that's why it's so important that we do optimize our gut health, because it really is the second brain.
I love that. I talk a lot about mirror neurons in some of my pathways and the lead to. And it really helps demystify when we talk about things like that's the vibe or the energy in the room. So actually thinking about, what's your gut feeling and linking it back to it being your second brain. It sounds so obvious, but it's something we forget quite regularly. So thank you so much for describing what that actually means. And so you touched upon hormonal changes and what it means. Do you mind telling us a little bit more around the effects of our hormones and how it impacts our gut or vice versa?
Yeah, absolutely. So as when we go through so many different hormonal changes, and that's typically we have, let's say, a 28-day cycle. That can vary, but typically we have that. Now there's different phases within that cycle. So we go from menstrual phase, and then we go into, follicular, we go into luteal phase, ovulation phases. So when we're moving through these phases, hormones shift. Now, that obviously looks different for women who are perimenopausal or menopausal. With all of these shifts that go on a monthly basis for women, this can actually influence our gut motility. So this is essentially how quickly, how efficiently our gut's contracting. You might notice that, for example, at certain parts of the cycle, let's say prior to the period, before day 1 to 5, you might notice a bit of constipation, a little bit of sluggishness, a little bit of bloating. And that's because the levels of estrogen, which are altering within the body. We also have things such as the microbiome diversity changing, even in the duration of that monthly cycle that occurs. And it's also linked to inflammation as well. So, for example, with estrogen and progesterone, it can actually impact how quickly your food moves through that body. So that's why some women complain of that constipation sometimes in the build up to the period. We have women who experience, let's say, diarrhea and cramping when they begin their period. And this is because both shifts in the hormones and prostaglandins too. When we have the dip in estrogen, when estrogen actually falls, this is where we feel that bloating, that weight gain. We can have cyclic headaches. We can have heavy periods as a result of low estrogen. If, for example, our estrogen, so that's when estrogen is high. When estrogen is low, we can get that hot flashes. We can get vaginal dryness, dry skin. So there's so many different issues that are symptoms that start to come up. Progesterone, when that is high in particular, is when we can feel groggy, bloated, nauseous. And that's quite typically seen in pregnancy, because pregnancy is a state where progesterone is high. When that progesterone comes low, can be a draw on our energy. We can start to feel low energy, lower mood. We can suffer from insomnia, trouble sleeping, weight gain. So it has a very real impact. actually not even just on the gut, but beyond the gut, on our mood as well. And essentially, it's really important to understand this cyclical changes that are occurring within our body so that we're able to better manage our symptoms and put preventative measures in place where possible as well.
That's so interesting because actually, when we talk about well-being, there's so much awareness. We talk about other aspects of our emotions and what we're feeling, but actually, what you're saying is linking everything we go through in the different seasons or the different cycles we had in a monthly period to really understand that's linked back to that inflammation. Where's that impacted? Actually, it's impacted in your gut. That's interesting to know the cycle and the impact that it will have on our bodies and as well as on our mental health and well-being. Coming back to the well-being part of it, the mental load, the mood swings, can you tell us a little bit more around how changes in our gut, how is that impacting our moods, our behaviors, our emotions?
Yeah. So progesterone as the hormone, when this is typically associated as the calming hormone. So when we have an increase in progesterone, you notice that you might feel a bit calmer, a bit more well regulated. And when progesterone is actually decreasing, is when you might feel that sense of anxiety spiking. And you might feel that sense of loss of sleep or struggling to fall asleep. And that directly impacts our mood. Now, when we're looking at it and linking that to gut health, alongside the hormonal health, when we're going through all of these changes, for example, we have this rise in prostaglandins during our first couple of days of our menstrual cycle. These are inflammatory compounds. So these can trigger those symptoms that we talked about. That's going to directly have an impact on our mental well-being, on our energy levels, on our sense of comfort and calm and regulation. Um, and also, another thing to add here is when women are living in chronically stressed states, when they're living in that fight flight mode, um, digestion is significantly impacted, right? So your blood flow actually is diverted away from digestion. And that actually leads to that sluggish, slow digestion, that bloating that we talked about earlier. But being in that state leaves you hypervigilant. It leaves you in a very stressed state. Even alters the production of, let's say, serotonin, for example, which is that associated with that happy hormone or that motivational drive type of hormone. So when that dips, when we're chronically stressed, this directly impacts the neurotransmitters that are being produced and the impact that it's having on our mental well-being as well, because that shifts, that change, the changes in those neurotransmitters too. So it's really important to have an understanding of that.
Yeah. And so on that piece around the nervous system, the mental load, and actually the stress impact it can have, it sounds like it can not just impact your periods, it can impact else related to it.
Absolutely. And another thing that can happen over time is if you're in a chronically stressed state, your gut lining can actually become more permeable. So you can actually develop something called leaky gut, which is it's becoming more and more common as time's going on. And this is because of the high stress state. So this is where those inflammatory molecules are actually able to penetrate that gut lining and enter the bloodstream. And that also affects your mood and your immunity too. So it's one of the reasons why stress management is so, so important when it comes to gut healing. Because if we're in that stress state and we're stuck in that stress state, our gut lining and our gut function is not able to be optimal and do its job as it should and as it should function. We're talking here slower digestion, not absorbing the nutrients as appropriately as we need to be, not being able to detoxify estrogens and progesterones from the gut, which is going to lead us with, like we said, those mood type of disorders and issues that we experience. So absolutely important to optimize gut health. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And then just on that, a lot of women will talk about being super tired, yet they're doing so much. They're wired all the time. In your view, does the influence of caffeine and different types of food impact that as well?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think there's so many different things now in our diet, in a modern diet that we have that influences our mood, our hormones, our gut health. This tired and wired thing that we experience, many of us do, this is actually a classic sign of adrenal dysregulation and gut imbalance. So the body is actually running high on cortisol and adrenaline. And whilst that's happening, the gut is being affected, becoming inflamed, sluggish, energy is going to feel very, very flat because we're running off these kind of stress hormones, right? And then when we're talking about, let's say we're fueling off of caffeine in the morning on an empty stomach, which is acidic, and which is going to again damage that gut lining and cause sensitivity and inflammation within it. We're setting ourselves up for failure, right? Because we're not getting the nourishment that we need to get in the right way in order for our bodies to thrive and really work as it should. So coming back to your point, I mean, dietary changes. Sugar is a big, big culprit, because when we ingest sugar and we start our day, especially on an empty stomach, you are spiking your blood glucose. And that's going to leave you feeling a little bit of energy for a while, but then you're going to come crashing right down an hour or so later. And that's going to leave you feeling drained, jittery, sluggish, tired, fatigued, moody, cranky. So it has a direct impact. Caffeine, again, it's a stimulant, so it works great for 2 hours maybe, and then again you'll have that crash where the energy levels dip, and then you need the next cup of coffee to pick yourself back up, and you get caught in that endless cycle of energy depletion and then a sharp rise, and depletion and a sharp rise. And it's not sustainable, clean energy. It's detrimental to our health in so many ways.
I love that quote that you just said. It's not sustainable energy, right? So actually it feels good in that moment, but really what you're saying is the impact it's having on our gut health, which fundamentally will also impact our mental health and our well-being, all has an impact on how we end up feeling that particular day. You've touched upon caffeine, you've touched upon sugar. Are there any common other behaviors that you notice in the work that you do that women or people in general tend to adopt as habits without realizing it, thinking that they're doing something good for themselves, but really it's having a really negative impact on their gut health?
Yeah. Well, I think there's definitely a lot there that I've seen in terms of lots of women are noticing going crazy with supplementation. I mean, they'll come to me and they'll have a huge array of supplements. Like, I'm taking omegas, I'm taking vitamin D, I'm taking glutathione, I'm taking all of these different things. And I've had clients who also take IV medications, infusions regularly, and they are neglecting the basics of their diet. So it's all good and well popping a pill, but when we're not getting the basics through protein, through healthy fats, through fibers, through our diet, through what we're actually ingesting and eating through natural, unprocessed whole foods, that's a really dangerous kind of slippery slope to go down. And I think that's one of the things that I've seen is a lot of supplementation through powders. And I'm going to take a protein powder, and I'll really encourage them and say, okay, what's your natural protein looking like? How many eggs are you eating? How much fatty fish are you eating in your diet? Let's look at your nuts and seeds and fiber intake. What's that looking like? So it's really helping them to go back to basics and get their plate in a healthier state and their diet in a healthier state, so that we're working with a strong foundation. Another trend that I'm seeing recently is a lot of people are big on protein now, right? Because they're working out, they're strength training. A lot of people are having lots of protein shakes or protein bars, or they're having energy bars, or even matcha, even certain types of matcha that are not as healthy as they might be coming across as, and they're filled with additives and sugars, especially the protein bars and shakes that are full of synthetic kind of ingredients there, filled with chemicals and just nasty that are in there. One of the things that I really tell them to do is focus on clean eating, and that means real clean eating. So going back to basics, I think that would be one piece of advice that I would give to anybody listening today: is look at your foundational nutritional needs and how you're getting those through your diet. That's a big red flag for me when I'm looking at working with clients.
Yeah, so a lot around the clean eating. And the bit that you said, which is so fundamental and it sounds so obvious, is actually supplements are supplements. They're not replacements. So stripping it back and just having clean, natural food.
And it's not even to say that supplements are a bad thing. Supplements can be very, very well placed in a diet that's already fantastic, but they still, for some reason, can't get those nutritional needs up. We'll say, okay, let's go in and let's add in vitamin D because you need it. Let's go in and add B complex vitamins because your body needs it. So there's certain incidences where I'm a big advocate of supplementation, but it has to have its place, and the foundations of diet and all the other pillars of wellness need to be in place first.
So many people are in this lifestyle now where they do skip meals. They think it's better to eat fewer, not as often, try not to snack as much. How does that impact gut health?
Mm. I think it depends on which way we're looking at eating and also your bodily state. So, for women in particular, because we have cyclical changes that occur, we have different ages and stages of life, we have pregnancies, we have perimenopause, menopause, etc. So, you really have to look at your age and stage of life to begin with, and we need to tailor the nutrition according to that. Now, there's some clients who do really, really well with intermittent fasting, for example, right? Some clients who are able to do 16, 17-hour fasts, and they feel fantastic. And fasting has a really good place for certain indications and certain people. So I definitely profile my clients before I advise of fasting. But one of the great examples of a benefit of fasting is it kickstarts something called autophagy, which is within the body where we start to fight those natural cells that are occurring, the mutations and the cancer cells that are growing. And it kickstarts your body to get into fight mode, and it really, really boosts the immunity in that way. So fantastic benefits, really helps with blood glucose regulation, insulin resistance, so many health benefits. But, and there's a big but here, for someone who is at, let's say, day 1 to 5, sorry, not day 1 to 5, slightly before or slightly after 1 to 5 of their period cycle, or let's say there's a woman who is pregnant or trying to conceive, or let's say there's somebody who's going through a particularly acute stressful situation, I'm not going to advise a 16, 17-hour fast for that client. I'm going to advise more of a stable regimen of eating. For example, in another incident where a client has IBS or a client might have a certain gut issue, I'm not going to do anything drastic with them. So as a rule of thumb, I would say focus on good quality 3 meals in a day. That is breakfast, lunch, dinner. Focus on healthy protein in each meal. And we want to try and also focus on non-meat options of protein as well. So plant-based sources of protein where possible, healthy fats, healthy proteins, fibers in each and every single meal that should be present. And I would say, get that going as a starting point. See how your body responds. Add in things like fermented foods like sauerkraut, kimchi. Make sure you're adequately hydrated. And especially in our climate in Dubai, which is so hot, adding in electrolytes into our water can really, really help benefit. And just in terms of that brain fog that people experience and that lack of energy, the dehydration. So that can really help. So I would say start with the basics. And if you have a specific need, let's say you want to really lose weight and you're in a good stage, and you want to try out fasting for that purpose, then we can design a protocol to help you. But it has to be bespoke. It really does.
You know, as you were speaking, it really reminded me of a book. It's called Fast Like a Girl. I don't know if you've come across it, around fasting and how it can impact. And I find it so fascinating. And the key takeaway that you've just given there as well is that there is that one size does not fit all, but having that your body type or what's going on, what you could potentially be doing that's damaging to your gut health is so essential, so that individuals can work with people like yourself to really get that tailored plan in place to support them with their mental health well-being. Do you mind just telling us a little bit more about what that potentially looks like in people's day-to-day lifestyles? What could be leading to that insulin resistance and inflammation?
So when we're looking at insulin resistance, this is something that occurs very slowly over a very prolonged period of time. This is not something that's happening overnight. Now, when I work with my clients, and let's say they're showing up and they haven't yet got insulin resistance, or they're not pre-diabetes just yet. But when I'm looking at their patterns of eating and they are having processed, heavy, sugary meals to begin and start their day, they are going from coffee cup to coffee cup filled with sugar. They are needing dessert after every meal. When they are fueling themselves with sugar regularly without even realizing it. And sugar's not just a case of Nutella toast. It's things that you might think that you might not think about. So, for example, a croissant, for example, a client of mine said, "Oh, I have a croissant with a little bit of fruit every single morning," and the croissant is a carbohydrate, right? It's a simple carbohydrate, and that actually converts to sugar within the body. So if we're repeating these habits on a daily basis over a prolonged period of time, that's what's going to move the needle towards insulin resistance. So over time, what happens is the body becomes less and less resistant to insulin. And over time, the body needs to increase the production of insulin. So the pancreas is working really hard to push up the production of insulin to get the same control of blood glucose level. And that's that process over time that starts occurring where insulin's gotten higher and higher and the body's become less sensitive to it. Now we have a problem where the body's not able to regulate our blood glucose level efficiently anymore with those same levels that the body produces of insulin. And that's because of that kind of lifetime exposure, or let's say good 20, 30 years in the buildup of fueling ourselves in the wrong way. That's kind of the cause, I would say, most likely. And a really, really big factor is sedentary lifestyles. Now we are in an era where a lot of the work that we do is sat at a desk, right? We're sat podcasting, we're sat down, we're not moving, we're not having any physical activity in this moment. So many people, that's a lived experience for their working role day to day. So it's about reminding them to add in the movement too, because movement, even 10 to 15 minutes of walking a day, can drastically improve insulin sensitivity within the body and helps to process blood glucose breakdown too, especially after a meal. So, I encourage small tweaks with my clients. Simple things like getting a walk in after you've had a meal can really, really help as a protective factor.
Yeah. Okay, so I mean, that's such a good takeaway there. So, in terms of something that you can add to your daily routine, is just factoring any form of movement after you've had something to eat to really level up your insulin within your body.
Yeah. And even something as simple as calf raises, right? If you're sat at a desk, every 15 minutes, do a couple of calf raises. Just lift your heels off the floor and lift them and raise them up and down around 10 to 20 times every 20 minutes. And that is going to get the muscles working, right? So just simple things like that. Daily movement, like we talked about, especially after meals. There's obviously a lot of other pillars of wellness that are linked to insulin resistance that we can talk about. But I'd say physical activity is a big, big one. And the other thing is, if we're overweight, if there's people out there that are overweight and they have lots of excess adipose tissue around their belly here, particularly abdominal fat, that's actually linked to an increased risk of insulin resistance and an increased risk of type 2 diabetes. Because, and this is really interesting because when we have higher levels of estrogen within the body, what you might find with some women is if they do suffer from higher levels of estrogen, you might notice that they have that shape where they've got very kind of widened hip region. And sometimes you'll find that kind of big belly that starts to emerge. And this is because when we have increased adipose tissue, we also have an increase in estrogen that's produced from those fat cells. And that then kind of leads to a bit of a loop. So we really need to tackle being overweight as well. Getting to a healthy weight within a healthy BMI range is really, really important too.
I know a lot of my friends are going to laugh when they hear this, but it's such a common thing where people, once that someone's had a meal, they're like, "Oh, I don't know why some days I look like I'm pregnant, but I'm not pregnant." And is that what you're saying? Is that the symptoms that people can start seeing, particularly in South Asians?
Oh, yeah.
around the insulin? Is it insulin? Is it inflammation? Is it a bit of both? What is that? What is the cause of, I guess, that looking pregnant, but you're not pregnant?
Yeah. So, I mean, if you're somebody who experiences chronic bloating, this that can give you that pregnant look, right? Especially if you're after you're eating highly processed foods, highly sugary foods, foods that are causing that inflammation within the stomach and the gut. That's going to give you that bloat. It's going to give you that pregnancy style. Okay, it's really popping out. It's not coming down. I'm having a lot of gas, etc. Constipation. That's a sign your body is really talking to you and saying, I am not happy with the quality of the food that you're putting inside of me, or maybe the timing of the day that you're eating. Or maybe your body is saying, actually, I'm in a highly stressed state and I'm not processing my food in the way that I should be. So, if you're somebody who is struggling with chronic bloating or any gut issues in that way, we really need to do a deep dive and see what it is we're putting into our gut. What are the times that we're eating? What's the quality of the nutrition looking like? And do we need a bit of a gut cleanse period where we change up the foods and switch up the nutrition and see if that has a more positive impact?
So interesting, Naima. Thank you so much. And so I'm hearing, is it a combination of different things? It's not just hormonal, it is what you eat, it's how much you exercise, but it could also link to other things like allergies potentially. So is it a understanding of what foods are suiting you and what aren't?
Absolutely. One of the things that I actually do at the Wellness Lab is we do food intolerance testing and sensitivity testing. And I am a big advocate of that because what works for some people might not work for other people, right? I've got clients who are completely gluten free. I've got clients who are absolutely fine with gluten. So you really have to, if you are suffering from certain gut issues and symptoms, I would definitely look to do a bit of a test and some investigation to see what's going on within the gut, what's the state of the gut. Even something as simple as keeping a food diary and saying, okay, I noticed that after I have tea or coffee on an empty stomach, my stomach doesn't feel great. It's really about being attuned and listening to the body very, very closely to understand what it's not happy with and what it is happy with, and what makes me feel good and energized and well, and what makes me feel drained, tired, lethargic, headaches after that. Your body is communicating to you all the time, and it's really important to be attuned to that. And we can do further testing to kind of, but like you said, it's a plethora. It's so many different things that come into play when we're looking at gut health. It is, like we said, age, points of our menstrual cycle. We're looking at, what we're eating. Is it processed foods? Do we have intolerances? Do we have a health condition, an underlying health condition? Are we taking medications? Maybe there's an interaction with something that you're ingesting in the medication. So there's so many different things we can look at when it comes to gut health. It's not just as simple as one thing, but worth looking into.
That really reminds me, when I was pregnant with my eldest, I did suffer from gestational diabetes. And when I had a similar health diary, which I would track, it turned out that watermelon in the morning would spike my sugars. And I thought, here I am having lots of watery fruit that just didn't suit me. Whereas for me, having carbs in the evening, it didn't spike my sugar as much as it did in the morning. So the point that you raise around really having that deep dive understanding of your own body is so important, because actually skipping carbs after 5, 6 might not work for certain individuals. So Naima, what are your views on gut health and skincare?
Well, I am actually, it's a really, really interesting and very relevant question that you asked, because I have been diving into my own skincare recently. I see a wonderful facial lady who's fantastic. And one of the things is so look, your skin is telling a story, right? It's creating a picture of what's going on internally. So if you notice that you have inflammation, redness, you're getting acne, your skin's just not settling in the way, or it's not looking the way you'd like it to, that's a sign, a direct sign that something is maybe not right in the gut. And there's a little bit of dysbiosis within the gut. That microbiome is not very happy right now. So we look at, again, coming back to the fundamentals of nutrition, are we having lots of antioxidants and fibers and all of those amazing vitamins that exist within natural foods, etc.? They're really, really important. And the gut and the skin actually share immune pathways too. So if your skin's flaring, definitely your gut could be a little bit inflamed as well. Yeah.
What are a few rituals that you think people should start to adopt if they want to really start to think about their gut health differently?
Mm. I've got a few rituals that I love to do personally, and I think they have been game changers for me personally. So I used to be the kind of person who would have coffee tea in the morning on an empty stomach, and I just could not do without it. But what I've learned over time is that's harmful for the gut and it's damaging to the gut. So one simple switch I've made is in the morning, starting my day with a glass of water, pinch of pink salt, and a squeeze of lemon. And that was one simple ritual and shift that I've done that I have seen have huge ripple effects in terms of my gut health, in terms of my skin, in terms of my focus, the brain fog not being there anymore. Simple switches like that are really, really helpful. Another one that I love to adopt, and I get all of my clients to do this, is add in bone broth to their routines. It is full of amazing goodness, so much collagen, so many essential vitamins and minerals that go into that. It is liquid gold, and they call it liquid gold for a reason. It internally is beautiful for the gut. It can work wonders in actually healing and repairing the gut lining. So bone broth is a definite one, I'd say. Batch cook it in a month, pop it in the freezer, put it into your soups, put it into your broths or curries or whatever you're having, add it into your routine, your daily routine. Uh, Another thing that I think gut health wise is really, really nice to do, aside from the basics of, solid nutrition, pre and probiotics. So we talked about fermented foods previously. I love for everybody to add fermented foods into their routine if they can daily. It can be something simple as kefir yogurt topped with some blueberries, which will give you that power packed antioxidant. Stick some nuts. Walnuts are amazing, omega-3s, flax seeds, chia seeds, top it off and have that as a snack or have that as breakfast, even if you want to. Berries are low glycemic index fruits. Your kefir yogurt has got protein in. And you've got amazing sources of omegas and healthy fibers from the nuts as well, and the seeds too. So just simple little changes into your routine and snacking habits that can really help.
Amazing. What sort of tips would you give people who are listening to this, who are just exhausted, stressed out, maybe feeling super bloated? What can they do to start reducing that bloated feeling or that less tiredness in their day-to-day from today?
Yeah. I think for people who are really stressed out and tired and they just don't have the capacity to go and, try this and try that, we say let's start with the basics and simple things like mindful eating. So putting your fork down between bites, chewing your food around 20 to 30 times before swallowing, because so many times we're eating in front of a screen. And that's another thing I'd say is turn off the screen, try not to eat in front of it, focus on what you're actually eating and that meal that you're having. Many people wolf it down within 2 minutes. I would say take a good 15 minutes to 20 minutes, focus on that meal, focus on each bite, chew adequately, do a couple of deep breaths beforehand and after, and really, really slow down when you're having your meal. And that is actually going to significantly reduce the bloat that comes post-eating.
That's such a good thing to be intentionally aware of. So actually what I'm hearing is watching TV or listening to something or scrolling on your phone whilst you're eating and trying to stack habits, which a lot of people try and do, could actually have a detrimental impact to how you're eating and how you're consuming that food, which can impact the gut health and your moods and the hormones that we spoke about already.
Absolutely.
And then just Going back to women's health around the periods, what are your views on people who maybe suffer from irregular periods? What is something that they could do to see how they can potentially start regulating their periods in this space as well?
Mm. I think when it comes to irregular periods, we really need to look at hormonal testing as a starting point. And I would be definitely keeping a diary of all of the dates that are occurring. And I'd also be keeping a bit of a food diary and seeing if there's any insensitivities within the gut that are occurring, but also looking for symptoms. So are they overweight? Is their progesterone lower than it needs to be? So what I would tap into here is actually going and getting some hormonal testing done so that we can look at the levels, because quite often when we're suffering from irregular periods, there's a hormonal imbalance, right? Those estrogen and progesterone levels are not really where they need to be. And there's lots of things that we can do to help with that, whether that's through diet, we're having soy-rich foods like tempeh, edamame, etc., or whether that's having a bioidentical progesterone supplement that we can take, a cream that you can apply. There are so many different options available, but it does require some investigation to do a deeper dive into hormonal health, I would say.
Everything you've shared, Naima, has been so useful. I think from your view, it'd be really good to know at what point do you need to also, once you've tried to implement some of these changes, also seek that professional medical health?
Mm. I think if you've tried natural interventions for a good 2 to 3 months, and you've cleaned up the diet, you're having whole unprocessed foods, you're hydrating well, you're moving well, you're getting adequate sleep, and that's one thing that we really haven't touched on that much this session. But sleep is your superpower, and if you're not getting enough of it, your body will keep the score of that. So if your basic fundamental pillars are in place and you're feeling like, actually, I'm still struggling with irregular periods, I've gone away and lost weight and I'm still not regulating my period, for example, that would be the time to say, okay, I need to go and see a doctor or a specialist in hormonal health to get to the bottom of it and the root cause, to understand what we can do to fix that for them.
And because so much of our moods, our health is linked from a gut perspective, also to do with our hormones, is that also more holistically when people are not finding that balance within the bloating, the hormones, their mood swings? That's when they should go and seek that professional help as well.
Absolutely. If you are feeling out of sync, really how we should be feeling waking up, we should be feeling comfortable within ourselves. We shouldn't be waking up extremely groggy or migraines or headaches or struggling to get things done. This is not the way we should be feeling. Definitely, there's certain parts in our cycle where we might feel more groggy on certain days because of hormonal shifts that occur naturally. But by and large, we should be feeling energized, clear minded. We should be feeling confident, having enough energy to go about our day and feel good within ourselves. And if we're not feeling that way, we do need to get to the root cause of mine.
Amazing. Naima, it's been so lovely to speak to you. You've shared so many gifts to all the listeners in this short amount of time. I think there's so many wonderful golden nuggets and takeaways that people can take away and start implementing from this moment. If there is one last piece of advice you'd like to share with our listeners, what would that be?
I think that the piece of advice that I have for your wonderful listeners here today is, you are not broken, you're burnt out, and your body is speaking. And it just needs a little bit of gentleness, a little bit of consistency. And also, healing isn't about perfection. It really is about coming home to your body. And that's through one mindful, nourishing moment at a time. That would be my takeaway and advice for everyone. And it's been an absolute pleasure to be here. So thank you so much for your time and for inviting me on. And I really, really do hope that all the women listening can take away even just one actionable piece of advice to help them on their journey through life. That would be amazing for me.
And how can people contact you, connect with you, follow the work that you do?
So I am on Instagram as the Wellness Lab UAE. So they can go ahead and give me a follow there. Feel free to drop a DM and I'll get back to them. And my website, if they want to find out a little bit more information, is www.thewellnesslabuae.com. And I'd be more than happy to help if anyone has any questions.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Naeema, for being on the Coaching Chapters podcast.
Thank you, Binish. My absolute pleasure.